All right, welcome back. So this is the second in this series. I'm going to call this one "Looking for a Wash," and gonna try and shorten some of these up. I'm trying to work on getting them out in a more timely fashion, but also I want to make them more consumable for people. I can talk a lot, as I'm sure you have figured out, and sometimes that's good for a long video, long format. But I think people more consumable small chunks might be a little more effective when it comes to what I'm trying to cover with this series. So I'm going to start with looking for a wash, and I want to take a step back for a second because I started the first in this series was forming an LLC, and I kind of got my timeline a little screwed up there, but it's okay. I actually went looking for the wash before I formed the LLC and did the business side of the house fairly fast. I got tongue twisted when I was talking in the last video, but regardless, doesn't matter. If you have the business, get the business. If you're confident you want to move on this, make your investment in the time getting the LLC ready, things like that, if that's the direction you want to go. And then you can, find the wash at your leisure. There are costs associated with maintaining the LLC, but it's really fairly minimal. What you may have to do yearly or what you may have to pay depending on your state and other resources. So there are a few ways you can go about looking for a wash. And I will tell you there are a few websites where you might find, depending on your area, the washes that are posted. Usually they're through a broker, and one of them is called LoopNet. I'll link all of these up here somewhere. Another is called Biz by Sell. There are some other ones there might be, and then there are things like Craigslist and other local resources to where you are. You aren't going to find a huge amount of them on LoopNet, Biz by Sell, etc. But they're out there, and it's a good way to look and good way to look at the cost and see, are people wanting, are they selling the business? Are they selling the business plus the land? Are they selling, is it depending on what you want to spend? And you will know your individual budget. That's where the whole leasing versus buying question comes in, and I'll get to that. I think I alluded to it earlier, like my situation being a lease. And it wasn't something I'd really considered myself until I was watching the Car Wash Chronicles channel on YouTube and looked at how he got into this business and a lot of his being leases. And it kind of made sense. I don't like it, but it's better than nothing. The other option is pounding the pavement, going out and seeing what's out there and seeing what's around. This is where you're going to look at washes, and you really need to know what you want to get into. Are you wanting something that is turnkey, where you can take over as an owner and you can run it? That's going to be a fairly significant expense, and you're probably going to be looking for somebody who wants to move out of the area, wants to retire, realized it's not for them, etc. And that's an easy way to get into it, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just recognize that you're probably going to be spending a lot more to do that up front, but you may get something that doesn't require the work that, for instance, like my wash did. The other option is to look for washes that need some help. You go there and you look at the brushes. The brushes are, maybe they're nylon brushes, maybe they're worn, maybe the pressure is not good, maybe they've only got 6 option selector switches on a really old box and it only takes quarters, and half of them are covered in duct tape, and you get we've all seen those. Diamond in the rough, potentially. There's a lot of other factors you need to look at for that. To determine if it's right for you. And then there, is also the whole trying to figure out who owns the thing. A lot of them don't have owner information posted, things like that. the Car Wash Chronicles, if you do follow that channel, which I recommend. Very good channel. The Revester is another one. I'll link them up here. I'll do the tag or however YouTube does it. I'm learning that. But really good channels, really good resources. They kind of cover a different type of the business than I have. Car Wash Chronicles, he has a course. It's a couple $100. I did it. I wanted to really learn from somebody who'd been there. And it's a good resource if you really don't have any clue, or not that you have any clue. It gives you a crash course in the kind of the business side, the thought, things like that. It again, this is an investment in yourself. You need to think of it as such. So one of the things he does is, he'll go around and look at a wash and say, "Hey, I'm interested in this wash," and he'll write a note for the owner and slip it under the door. That's a technique. If you've got people coming and going, or, a lot of car wash equipment rooms like mine are not very conditioned spaces, your note might get wet, might get torn, might get blown out from under the door. The night guy who comes in to sweep the bays and empty the trash might pick it up and throw it away thinking it's trash. So, your mileage may vary. But pounding the pavement, you find what you want. So, little backstory on my wash. I actually 5 years ago today, we signed the offer on the house I'm sitting in right now, our second home in Rehoboth Beach. And I initially, and this is before I even thought about starting a wash. I'm a car guy. I like to keep my car clean, and I was here over the winter, and I was driving around trying to find a car wash, and I couldn't find a self-serve. And I will not go through a tunnel. I will not go through, as long as it's touchless, yes, but anything non-touch, that's personal preference. I don't like swirls, and they're not all the same. I'm not putting them down, but a lot of your washes, sure, you'll be clean, but there is collateral damage that comes with it. I couldn't find a car wash in there. I'm like, man, as a consumer, I was frustrated. So let's fast forward. When I started looking for washes, and I'm in the Metro Washington, D.C. area for our primary home, not for long, hopefully, but we're there, and then we have our home here. And I had been looking in the area there. Exceedingly expensive. Everything was really far out. Not really what I had wanted, but I was like, all right, let's just see. I started looking here. And I was driving around, and I was like, hey, I found a car wash. But I was looking at it also from the perspective of I need to wash my car. And I was this behind a Jiffy Lube, not far from the house here, like 4 minutes away. And I rolled in, and I'm like, this place, oh my God, it's shut down. And like that light bulb went off in my head of, this is weird. This is too close. Everything's kind of aligning. Go follow. So, it was called Jiffy Car Wash, but the lettering had been taken off. I knew there was the Jiffy Lube in front. I'm like, well, I'm sure it's all related, but let's do some research. I didn't just want to cold call the Jiffy Lube. So I went back and started looking at county tax records, finding who the parcel owner was, started digging and found the owner, and found the company that they owned, recognized that, okay, they, just throw in the name in Google. And was like, oh, okay, I found an article where they bought the Jiffy Lube years ago. Featured in the paper. We're not that big of an area here, so something like that, kind of, seismic, and a couple $1 million business being purchased. So found the gentleman's name, and I went to LinkedIn and found him. And the profile hadn't been updated in a while, but it was there. I sent a LinkedIn message. Didn't hear anything back. Gave it about a week. Thought, I want to be patient. After about a week, I started scouring again, doing some Googling names. I was all excited, and I found phone numbers and mailing addresses for the owners. I knew that I wanted to lease my first wash. I didn't want to have the real estate investment. I didn't have the capital. I mean, at this point, this was all a hope and a dream, and it was, I'll find the dream, I'll find the money. I have the money to personally fund it, sure. But piercing the corporate veil, I'm an LLC. Yes, that's an owner investment. However, I wanted the company to have the company's finances and just build it from scratch as an independent entity. So I knew I wanted a lease, but I'm like, let's see what these, if anybody. And so I shot an email, very well formed, and I said, hey, I'm, in the area. I saw your wash. I saw that it shut down. Are you interested in discussing either a purchase or a lease? I did put it both out there, but I put the lease factor out there. Said, I'm trying to get into this business, and I kind of put it on the table. But I made sure that it was well formed. I made sure that I looked legit, not like a scammer. It wasn't an hour later, I got an email back, and it was a lady, and she was like, "Let's talk." And it was the owner. It's a husband and wife that own the Jiffy Lube and their business, and they have their business. That they had done everything, and we had a phone call, and they said they had a lot of people calling wanting to buy it, and they're not interested in selling, but this whole lease thing, and I'm like, well, I'm looking. So we had probably about an hour long conversation just about what I wanted to do. Found out that they had thought about actually tearing the wash down. They had thought about tearing the bays up and making into oil change bays. They're not really sized well enough for that. There were a lot of things, and it was this, it all just sort of seemed to work out, and we clicked really well, personality wise. And it just from there, we said let's talk. So I put some stuff down. I started working on ideas, and in the meantime, I was working on a business plan. Business plan is a very important thing. I'm actually going to do a whole video on that. I'm going to write this down here because that is key. For if you want to go try and find funding, or not just that, but to have direction. So long story short, we talked. We got things on paper, and I worked on what I thought would be an appropriate lease terms, or what I thought with the valuation. They didn't have any idea. I said, let's do some research. Let's discuss. It took a lot of time. I started again, at this point, things just worked out for a reason, and one of the things that got me about my wash, and this goes to what to look for, and I talked about it earlier, is I'm a very technical person. My background's engineering. And as a young child, I understood basic electrics at 5 years old. I got into an argument with my father when I was younger about I was playing with an aquarium pump in a pond I had dug in the backyard, and he was yelling at me for having electric out there, and I'm like, but it's grounded now. It was on a GFCI, but I didn't, but the whole thing is like I understood, and I was like, I'm making some safety. So I'm a very technical person, and I wanted a project. Turnkey would have been nice, but I'm like, I need to come in here at the lowest possible cost to me to make this baby shine, because I knew I was going to be doing the vast majority, if not all, of the plumbing, electrical, labor, etc., etc. A lot of people may not be in that situation, so you need to consider what you're getting into. In the case of my wash, the bays all had poly lines running out to the bays. The booms had been taken out, both the foam boom as well as the centers. The center, the high pressure, still had the pressure lines running to them. The boxes were there. They were connected, but they had already started cutting the electrics out in the equipment room. Low voltage, high voltage, everything. The plumbing had been chopped off. A lot of the equipment the pumps and motors were thrown on shelves. But a lot of the equipment had been gotten rid of, scrapped. It was, I came in just in time, and was able to, say, hey, the equipment's end of life. The Cat 310 pumps, for instance, these motors they're Baldor, or they're good motors, but they're old, noisy, three-phase. Well, I knew I could pull them apart and lubricate them. I knew that those pumps, as long as they weren't washed out, which that's a technical term for when they're physically eroded inside, but you can sleeve them. You can buy the kits. They're not cheap, but I knew I could get them going again. So it kind of fit everything I knew to look for. One of the key things for me I learned about from the videos, from the both the classes and the videos, actually, from the Revester and Car Wash Chronicles, were location. And I have a really good location. You can do research on what they call the AADT. It's your average annual daily traffic for the roads you're on. I am off of Route 1, which is Coastal Highway, which runs from basically Wilmington, Delaware, down to Ocean City, Maryland. And it parallels the coast. And in the section we're at, my AADT 2 years ago was 65,000 cars a day going down Route 1. Now, I'm off a small road off of Route 1, but I'm visible. Not as visible as I'd like, but that's where I do such things as I have feather flags by the road. I have a wacky waving inflatable tube man that I put out when the weather is appropriate by the road. I have signage that I went with my corporate colors, the yellow and green, that are bold. My building is boldly colored. It stands out. I'm still looking at things like reflectors that spin in the wind to like draw the human eye for attraction, things like that. But for being adjacent and off a minor road, I'm also next to a popular restaurant. So there's, I get a lot of visual traffic. That's a really key thing. You might think you could get a good deal on this wash that's, outside of a suburb or something like that. Unless you're going to advertise the hell out of it, unless you're going to really do signage, unless, at that point, especially if you're in a developed-in area, you have a captive customer base. That could be a good thing, that could be a bad thing. But you need to be cognizant of that. So, you need to look at location. You need to look at your comfort level. What are you comfortable building out? What are your finances in terms of, are you going to try and self-fund? Are you going to try and get a loan? Do you qualify for a loan? What type of loan do you qualify for? SBA, SBA 7A. There are different kinds that you can go and do some research on. There are alternate funding opportunities available. I'm actually, I was able to take advantage. So kind of getting into some areas I want to touch in another video, but just briefly, we have a very good small business support network here in Delaware, and the SBDC, the Delaware Small Business Development Corporation, I believe is what it is. But they, I did some digging, and I'm like, some of this stuff I don't know what I'm doing, but I need to talk to somebody, and they had free advising. And got hooked up with a guy, really good advisor. Later on, when I was showing him my business plan, things like that, he was very helpful. And he mentioned that he had caught wind of a small business funding, an alternate funding opportunity through essentially a lender that is trying to work with small area development. Now, we in Rehoboth Beach and in Lewis, which is where my wash, are a seasonal area because it's changing, but it's seasonal because of our proximity to the ocean. I'm only, a little over a mile off the ocean right here as I sit. Not even that, actually. But our population is small for most of the year, or the actual permanent population. So it qualified as a small area that, like a small area revitalization, even though it's not an economically, it's a good, strong, economically funded area. The caveat being that my personal finances got gone through up one side, down the other. I had to be very, well, hang on, figure out my screensaver. I had to be very cognizant of that, but I was okay with that, and I got a very nice loan to start my business. I regret not asking for a little bit more, but I do appreciate that my monthly payment is not that much. And again, I could have self-funded, but I wanted this business to build itself, pay for itself, recognizing that it would take 1 or 2 years for me to get to where I'd make any money from it, where I could maybe pocket anything from an owner draw, but that's okay because I'm looking at this as a long-term gain. So, you know, I came into it knowing the amount of money I would need, under 100,000. I don't really want to get too much into specifics, but and a lot of that was because I could reuse some of the equipment that was there, and I could do a lot of the labor. And I also had a very understanding spouse and understanding dog that I'm going to be gone for the next 6, 8 months. Are going to be hell, where I'm working my full-time job plus I'm doing this at night and back and forth, and but had the support network. That's important too, and that is not something that you want to omit, or even if it is your business, it's still a consideration that the family needs to understand, people need to understand, and need to be okay with. So another thing to consider is your proximity to providers for things such as your supplies, any equipment you might need. Some of the big names in the business are Clean Right. Clean Right's about the biggest at this point. I am in an area where I can get next day shipments from Clean Right pretty regularly if need be. I'm about 3 hours from their location in Pennsylvania. And I do have my little van, and I drive up there, and when I'm getting soap, for instance, about every 2 or 3 months, I'll take a road trip up on a day that I got off or something. I'll take a day off, and I will do a will call pickup and load up with, I don't know, maybe 75 gallons of soap concentrate, something that would be cost prohibitive to ship. Then I can take the van up and load up, and save. That helps. But again, that was a consideration that I am proximal to some of these things. And we've got a lot of industrial suppliers. I have a Home Depot down the road that I spend far too much time and far too much money at, and they know me far too well there. But if I need to do something and I need to get there quick, like yesterday, I had to go twice and fairly rapid succession. Yesterday, February 14th, Valentine's Day, was the busiest day I've had since I've opened. So basically a year and a half, busiest day. It was insane. And I loved it, but it was a stress test of both the equipment and me. If you saw my short, you'll know that I had to deal with such things as a pipe exploding. I had to deal with running out of water at one point because the pumps were drawing so much that the water heater and the backfill couldn't keep up. That's what I had to fix. And I had somebody crash into my building and knock a fire extinguisher into the parking lot. So it was a day. Getting ahead of myself here. But Home Depot came to the rescue. If you got to drive hours and hours to get things you need, you got to decide if this is right for you or the location is right for you. Maybe go to another location. Now, when I bought this, or when I bought the wash, leased the building, started the business, I was living primarily at our house north of Washington, D.C., and I was 2 hours and 20 minutes to get to the wash from my house. Now, granted, it's 5 minutes from our house here, but before we decided that we were going to live here full time, I had quite a few nights where I'd look on the camera and be like, why is there water spraying in the equipment room? Or why is that wheel and tire brush just dumping gallons of wheel and tire cleaner down the drain in a bay because a solenoid valve stuck? And I'd have to tear over here at 10 o'clock at night to fix something come to the house here, catch 4 hours of sleep, and drive back the next morning so I could be online at 7:30 for my job through the week. It was tough. I wouldn't have considered doing something like that if we didn't have the house here. But if you look at Car Wash Chronicles, he's got a few washes that are a couple hours away from where he lives. And he makes the trip up. You know, he's California, big distance, you know, within the same state. But still, definitely you need to have these things in consideration. You know, so a lot of it is just going out and looking and seeing and taking the blinders off when you look at the location and saying, is this something I want to start? Is the building solid? Is the area solid? You know, is there a lot of competition? I don't have competition in the self-serve space for 9 miles each direction. So that's a little bit of a boon for me. But even if I did, I'm going to bring the customer service edge. I'm going to bring the premium brushes. I'm going to bring the accessibility, the things I've talked about in other videos. That's where I'm going to find my edge, where they may not. For me, this, yes, it's passive income, but it's only passive if you let it be. You know, there might be a day or two where I don't have to go over there for whatever, but I'm there. I'm accessible. So these are a lot of things to think about when you're looking at a wash. And I think the final thing is the bones of the building. If you're taking something over, you know, in the case of mine, very good bones to the building. Although, as I've covered in other videos, maybe the design, now that I have owned it for a while and worked with it, not the best design, but I can work with it. You know, I would love to have a centralized equipment room rather than one at one end of the wash. I'd like to have a little different traffic flow. You know, different size bays that would help me do things such as add an in-bay automatic easier without having to do construction to the building. My attic access is good in areas, terrible in others, and it's filthy when I have to get up there and do anything because of the way my building is constructed. So these are some things to consider when you're looking for the wash. There are a lot of things when I cover the business plan video, I think that we'll kind of dive a little more in depth with this. And I'll go over my business plan. I need to actually maybe do a little bit of redacting of some personal information in there. However, I think that it would be pertinent for people to see what I went forth with, because I look at this from a project management perspective, having a PM, having former PMP, but having, you know, a project management background, and I attacked it from a different perspective, that when it came time to go to the bank or my lender or go anywhere to say, hey, this is what I want to do, I looked polished because the information was down and I answered the questions before they were asked. I'm really trying to keep these short. I know I said this is 28 minutes right now. I'm good. It's probably gonna be about 30 minutes by the time I finish everything, get all the editing, and that's gonna be where I'm gonna try and cap some of these at. I've got my outline here, so a lot of this is a stream of consciousness, stream of conscious. Sorry, it's been a very long day, very busy 2 days. So if there are things you think I've missed or you'd like me to delve into, drop a comment below and I'd be glad to circle back either in the comments or if need be, I can do an addendum to the video or whatever. We'll work with these. Like I said, I'm enjoying doing this, but some of this is more to help people and me to get some things down on paper. So let me know how I can help. That being said, I'm going to drop a few of the links I've talked about in here, but, we tried to cover, where to find them, what to look for, knowing your comfort level, matching your comfort level technical wise with the space that you're looking at. What does it need? Turnkey versus complete gut job, proximity to your suppliers, and a sale versus lease. It's kind of the big things I wanted to cover in this one. I did cover. So catch you on the next video. Have a great day.